They just had
and I didn't want to write.
they changed it.
It's about 100 feet. And that's one of those spots.
You've already signed it. No, you haven't. No. I didn't mean to slight you.
The first time I saw it, but now it's
Are we live now? Okay. Okay, well, I have a little after 6, so I'd like to get started. Welcome to tonight's preliminary public meeting. We're here to discuss the future improvements to the Berwick-Somersworth Bridge, which carries Route 9 over the Salmon Falls River. I'm Nate Benoit. I'm from the Maine Department of Transportation, and we have a number of people that are associated with the project that are here, and I'll do my best to introduce all of you. We have from VHB, Greg Gugrich and Steve Hodgson from VHB, and we also have Julie Whitmore in the back, who's one of the project designers. We have our utility coordinator here, Jerry Quirian. I want to wave, Jerry. Yeah, and also from New Hampshire DOT, we have C.R. Willicke. There's a number of town officials here as well. We have Tom Willis, who's a Public Works Director from the City of Somersworth. Dave Sharples in the back from the City of Somersworth. We have, I believe you're the city city manager, Bob Belmore, thank you. So we have a number of officials. Anyone else that wants to be identified at this time?
We have our public works director here, John Cynthia.
Yes, and we have John as well.
Chris Weisman also is here from Water. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a number of local officials. Thank you all for attending. I'd also like to introduce Robin Dostey, who is our court reporter. And the purpose of having Robin here is to have a written transcript of tonight's meeting. The purpose of this meeting is for us, the department, to share information that we've gathered about a future project, and also to give you all an opportunity to have any comments that you can voice about the project, or if you have any questions, we will answer those as well. There's a sign-in sheet that's going around. Please make sure you sign in. And we have a notice and some information on civil rights and information about our property acquisition process. You're welcome to take one of these. You can have one now or after the meeting. If there's anyone that doesn't have a notice, this has my contact information on it. You want a hand?
Sure.
Maybe a hand. Yeah. The notice there on the bottom of that, my email address and phone number is on that form. You're welcome to email or call me anytime. In terms of question and answers, we have a short presentation that Greg is going to do following my talk. And then following Greg's talk, we'll open it up to the question and answers. So just please hold off if you have any questions until the end, and then come up and speak into the mic. In terms of the project history, this project has been funded for bridge improvements as part of the 12-13 work plan, and the Maine Department of Transportation is the lead on the project. However, there is a city share. The city of Somersworth, along with the Maine DOT, co-own the bridge and will be funding the project. At this time, I'm going to let Greg take it from here.
Thank you very much, Nate. If anybody can't hear me at any point, please let me know. I'll do my best to speak up.
Let me just get this right.
There we go. Okay. So Nate just did the introductions. Whoop, sorry. So we'll skip past this slide. Meeting overview. Basically, as we know, we're all here to discuss the Route 9 bridge over the Salmon Falls River. The basic process, let's try and bring this into focus a little bit better. There we go. What we're going to try and do before we get into specifics about this project is we're going to just give you a brief overview of the Maine DOT bridge project development process. We're going to discuss what the project goals are. We'll discuss future aesthetics, construction considerations, and then at the end, as Nate mentioned, we're going to open it up for question and comment. So we'll buzz through a lot of these slides. There are several, but we'll go through it relatively quickly to get to the meat of it. So the Maine DOT project development process is actually a 15-step process, but we're just going to boil it down for discussion purposes into 3 phases, which basically where we are now is project kickoff and organization. So we're at the very beginning stages of this project. We really haven't started the final design, which will be after we define what the project is. We haven't done that yet. We're in the defining process, which is why we're looking for input from the public at this point. Then we'll go into final design, and then ultimately we'll culminate in construction of the project. So. As I mentioned, we're at the project kickoff and organization phase at this stage. So basically what we do is we kick the project off internally, and then we start doing some organization and data collection, which basically, site surveys, identifying historic and environmental resources, basically getting our arms around the tangibles of the project before we actually, start moving forward. We need to define what's there. And then we get into public and team meetings. So naturally, this is the first of a series of public meetings that we'll be holding for this project. And then the preliminary design report, where we'll actually do some conceptual design, and then we'll actually put that forth into a report and make a recommendation for the state to decide on moving forward. And then after that stage, we go into final design, and we actually start proceeding towards construction at that point. So as I said, this is the public meeting. The purpose of the public meeting is just to introduce the project to the public and then get your input. And so that's effectively what we're trying to do at this point, is just to introduce everything to you guys and see what your concerns are and so on and so forth. So project goals for this project, it's originally slated as a deck replacement. Of course, a lot of you are all aware that the deck itself is in pretty tough shape. So there's a series of things that we're looking at doing here. But so it's originally a deck replacement. There's going to be some aesthetic upgrades that we'll touch on. And then we're also trying to minimize, obviously, impacts to local businesses, residents, traveling public. These are all things that we're keeping close to heart. And environmental and historical resources, if there are any inside the project limits. And then we're also coordinating with utilities. There's utilities on and over the bridge, and also the railroad at the very end of the bridge, which is another component as well. So project features. Existing bridge site conditions, we're going to step through these things. Existing site conditions, conceptual typical section, aesthetic alternatives, construction considerations, and then at that point, we'll open it up. So you're all pretty familiar with the site. This is the same area that we have over here. location over the Salmon Falls River. The extent of the project is pretty much just the bridge. We're not going to go too much beyond the bridge. There's another shot of the bridge from the Maine side looking across towards Somersworth. The existing superstructure was originally constructed in 1963. There was a bridge there previous, and that was replaced for the most part. The bridge itself is a 110-foot span, steel girder, and basically when in 63 the Maine abutment was replaced, the New Hampshire abutment is portions of that are being reused, and the superstructure was completely new in 63. So concrete deck with asphalt wearing surface is what's out there now. You're all familiar with it. Painted steel railings. There's some deficiencies with the deck. I've personally inspected the bridge. So of course there's some problems with the actual deck itself, which is why the impetus for the project. And of course the railing itself is the original 1963 railing, and it's needs to paint and so forth. And it's also a substandard railing at this time. And of course, the wearing surface on the bridge deck itself is degrading. So the existing typical section, this is what's out there now. Basically 52 feet from curb to curb. And the configuration is one thing I'd like to point out at this point. Basically, you're looking from Somersworth looking at Maine. So the sidewalk is on the south side of the bridge, and you've basically got two lanes, a through lane and a left turn lane. And then coming from Maine to New Hampshire, there's one lane. And notice the size of this lane now. That's going to come into play a little bit later in the discussion. So this is the existing typical. This is what you currently have. This is, again, just conceptual. We haven't done any final design. This is all just to kind of, give you guys an impression of, what we're thinking about at this point. And then we'll take your input and considerations. So I mentioned the lanes before. We're still going to have the same traffic movement, 2 lanes from Somersworth to New Hampshire, a left turn lane and a through lane. The lane returning is going to be a normal size lane. What we're doing here is we're looking at providing shoulders on either side that are standard shoulders, and then we're also retaining the sidewalk, replacing the sidewalk on the south side, and then we're also considering putting in a sidewalk on the north side of the bridge as well. Currently, it's basically a wide brush curb. It's not technically a sidewalk, although we've seen lots of people in the time that we've been out there using it as a sidewalk. But by the standards, it's not a standard width sidewalk, so we're looking at doing that. Here's a historic photo that we ran across over the Salmon Falls River. Aesthetic alternatives is something that naturally we're also paying special attention to. We're working with with the city of Somersworth, town of Berwick, to make some aesthetic upgrades as you cross the bridge, railing upgrades, maybe some lighting, things of that nature, to make it a little more appealing looking. And one of the things that we're doing, if possible, is where we have historic photographs, if we can incorporate any of those, it can't be exact because unfortunately the way they did things back then aren't the way that we do things now, but sometimes we can incorporate some features that might pay homage to, in the past. But so just visual cues that we're looking for from time to time or anything like that. So that's why we're looking at that. So typically speaking, a normal highway bridge, this is a photo of standard highway bridge railing. The reason why we point this out is typically speaking on a project, this is what we would immediately jump to, something like that. But for this type application, aesthetic upgrades, it's not the prettiest rail to look at, but generally speaking, that's what you're going to get. Now, with the city of Somersworth, we're working towards an agreement with the Maine DOT and so forth. They're going to actually provide some extra monies to do some of these aesthetic upgrades to make that possible, to make some of these, so that we can actually make up the cost difference between the standard railing and whatever it is that we end up with, so that we can kind of make some of these enhancements to beautify the downtown. And by the way, there is, as I understand it, a project in the future in downtown Somersworth that they're looking for doing some other beautification and so forth. So naturally, we're trying to coordinate as much as we can so that there's some consistency between the two where possible. So, and we're working with the city of Somersworth on that. So these are just some photos of options, okay? Just to kind of give you an idea of what's out there, what's been done recently. There's basically a few different alternatives: steel railings, concrete railings, hybrid railings. You'll see some photos of all these. What I'm showing here is a sample of concrete railing, which is commonly known as Texas rail, but there are a few different names for it. But this picture on the left was actually a bridge we recently did up in Belfast, Maine. So again, it's concrete. This is an actual pedestrian bridge. However, concrete railing is fine for traffic as well. So the center and right-hand photographs are a project that was recently completed in Manchester, New Hampshire, Granite Street. So that just kind of gives you some visual ideas of what that might look like. This is an example of aluminum railing, which is commonly used in more urbanized areas as well, black anodized. And this project was recently completed. This is Vermont, okay? This is Woodstock, Vermont, and Route 4, for those of you who may have traveled that way. Another look at the aluminum railing, more of a head-on view, if you will. This is a project that was in Middlebury, Vermont, recently done, just put into service about a year and a half ago. Here's what I call a hybrid, concrete and steel. This project was recently completed in 2009 in Bethel, Vermont. But what I want to point out here is different aesthetic treatments that can be done, and then it has a steel handrail on top of it that's painted. So again, this is something that can be done. Different variations on this, naturally. Variations on the handrail and variations on the concrete itself, depending on what look you're going for. So there's a lot of flexibility in something like this. This is, again, just a sample of things that you can do, in case that appeals to you. This is Bellamy Bridge. Actually, the two, I believe, the right and the center photos are Bellamy in Dover. And then this one, I'm not sure where this photograph on the left was taken. I don't know, Steve or Nate, if it looks familiar to either of you, but I believe it was in Maine. I want to say Portland, actually.
Correct.
Yep.
That one's New Hampshire.
This one is New Hampshire. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so those are some railing ideas, things that we can do. Construction considerations. As we move into the construction phase, one of the things that we're looking at, pedestrian access, and we're going to step through these again. Pedestrian access considerations, naturally, we have a sidewalk there, and that's one of the things that we're concerned about, not just in the final condition, but actually during construction. How are we going to handle pedestrian traffic through the construction site or around it? Phased bridge construction, we're going to acquaint you with that, and then another style of construction, which is called accelerated bridge construction. So I'm going to touch on all these, starting with pedestrian access. Basically, our primary focus is, if possible, maintaining pedestrian access through the project site during construction. There's some geometrical constraints here that hopefully we can overcome in order to do that. But anyways, one of the things is maintaining it through the site during construction, or if we can't do that, another option that we have is providing a temporary pedestrian bridge beside the existing bridge while we construct. Again, to remove pedestrians from the bridge, but still provide access over the water. Another alternative, if we're doing accelerated bridge construction, is we may discontinue pedestrian access on a very short-term temporary basis just to actually do some rapid construction. But that wouldn't be a long-term thing. So that's certainly one of the things that we would not do. So I mentioned phased bridge construction. A few of the things, geometric constraints. For this particular project, it's a wide bridge, but the girder layout is one of the things that's going to dictate to us how we can actually phase construction. What we want to do, come on in. Yeah. Oh, no problem. So currently you have 3 lanes on the bridge, 2 lanes from Somersworth to Maine, and then 1 lane coming back. During construction, because of the geometric constraints, we're going to have to neck that down to 2 lanes, 1 in each direction. So this is going to come into play when we start talking about traffic control, because this is a main concern as well as we're developing, the project and which way we're going to go. Phased bridge construction is typically a longer duration. Depending on which way this bridge goes and what the actual final scope of work is for the project, how much work is actually going to be done, will actually dictate, whether it's a few months or whether it's an entire construction season or possibly bleed into a second season, depending on how much work needs to be done and the detailing of the bridge and how quickly we can do that. So those are some of the things that will come into consideration for phased bridge construction. As far as traffic is concerned, really our main concern here is necking it down from 2 lanes from Somersworth to Maine into 1. There's a few options. As many of you know, are there any business owners here in downtown Somersworth? Okay. You probably have firsthand knowledge. I'm sure everybody here has firsthand knowledge of what the traffic's like during peak hours and so forth and how it backs up. So naturally, if you take 2 lanes and take it into 1, if you allow left-hand turn as you're going across the bridge, if there's somebody trying to take a left, but there's traffic coming the other way, you can't take a left, so that's going to stop, and that's going to back up traffic even more, okay? So one of the things that we're considering doing is if we allow traffic to turn left, as is currently done, but only using 1 lane, that's based on our preliminary numbers for traffic, it's probably going to back it up well into the Main Street intersection, the Y, by Villa Pizza, okay? So I don't know, based on your experience, if does it already do that to some degree? Okay, so it's just gonna be worse, okay? That's the point there. If we neck it down and allow left-hand turns there, then that's gonna be a negative effect, okay? So another thing that we're looking at doing is not allowing a left-hand turn and rerouting traffic to go up School Street and then take a left on Wilson Street. Okay, to kind of like a very short local detour, but what that would do is hopefully open up traffic to a point where it wouldn't back it up quite as bad. Now, obviously, anytime you're cutting down lanes, there's going to be a negative impact, but we're trying to mitigate for that. We haven't done the final traffic analysis yet. Once we know which way we're going, we'll do more traffic counts and we'll do a more refined analysis. But as far as for discussion purposes, it'll give you an idea of what our options are there. So that's what we're looking at. Additional analysis required. So phased bridge construction, this is basically what it would look like. This again is orienting yourself. You're looking from Somersworth, looking at the main side, okay? So necking it down in order to build the north side of the bridge, and then you would basically have, 2 lanes of traffic, 1 in each direction. And that's basically what you would have, okay? So tighter, much tighter than what you're used to now, but temporary. Another consideration that we have for construction is what they call accelerated bridge construction. This is something that's the DOTs are doing more and more of now. And the basic mantra there is get in, get out, and stay out. So the theory here is, well, it's not a theory, we do it in practice. Just make the duration of construction as short as you possibly can using modified construction techniques, a lot of precast construction components. Typically with construction, what we're doing is you would build formwork on site, install rebar, pour concrete, cure the concrete, then build on top of it. That takes time. A lot of time with accelerated bridge construction, we're dealing with precast components that are built off site, brought on site, assembled, and then opened up. So it's a much shorter, depending on the actual scope of work, again, it can be anywhere from a few weeks to a month or 2, depending on the style of bridge. Some of you may have heard of Fast 14. That was done in a weekend where they actually replaced entire highway bridges over the course of a weekend. So it can be done. The technology exists. We've done it. And we've been doing it we do a lot of railroad bridges, and rapid bridge construction is something that we have to do with railroad because you simply can't shut them down for months at a time. You shut them down for a weekend and that's it, and then you open it back up, and then maybe another weekend you do a series. And that's also something that we could do here possibly is a series of weekend shutdowns. Another thing that we're evaluating, okay? But the basic premise here is it provides a safer work environment and the contractor has exclusive rights to the bridge. He can get on there and do whatever he needs to do, but he has to do it quickly and then open it back up for the public. Again, something that we're evaluating. Just depends on what we end up doing for the overall construction. But we could do series of weekend shutdowns, or if we're going to do entire replacement of the superstructure, something like that might require a few weeks at a time. So naturally, in order to do that, shorter duration shutdown, we'd have to reroute traffic and detour around the bridge instead of maintaining traffic through the bridge, okay? So traffic control, basically there's short local traffic detours that we wouldn't sign as a part of the overall bridge package. What we would do is sign an actual regional traffic detour, which would be for truck traffic and people who aren't local, people who don't know the roads around here that may be traveling through and they say, okay, detour this way, I gotta go this way. And typically what we do there is sign it on state routes and, you know, try and get traffic off of the local roads to the extent possible. However, as far as short local traffic detours, you know, residents, people who know the area can certainly go other ways, and there are other ways. But we wouldn't route all the traffic that way because naturally that has impacts on, you know, noise or the actual roads themselves may not be able to handle the additional volume of traffic. This is all something that needs to be analyzed as we move forward, depending on which way we go. So here's...
What's
Yes.
the demolition time with an ABC way to go?
Well, and the question, for those of you who didn't hear, was what's the typical demolition time? And that depends on the overall style of construction or the scope of work that we're doing. A lot of times, like for instance, for the Fast 14, the contractor would get in the evenings and they would actually, you know, they would make saw cuts, they would do some prep work so that when time came to actually shut it down, they could actually do a quick removal, maybe half a day, something like that, and then replace the components and get the new construction ready. So it really, to the point that we have the project defined now, we really don't have a solid answer on that because it just depends on whether we end up doing, you know, a full superstructure replacement, just a deck replacement. So it just depends. But it could be anywhere from half a day to a day or two, depending. But good question. Yep. So this is the primary detour route that we have identified just for, you know, illustration purposes. This would be signed as a part of the package. So down 236 to Route 4 Bridge down in South Berwick, and then up Somersworth Road to Main Street. Now, some of you may have caught that I said state routes. Well, Main Street's not a state route. However, we would, in that case, look to the municipality for permission to do that if we felt that you know, the actual street itself could handle the additional volume. And again, with additional analysis and with permission, we may be able to do something like that. Otherwise, just to exclusively stick to state routes, it would be a few additional miles going basically down to Dover, okay? This route that we're showing you here is approximately 9 miles. And some of you may know there's Buffinsville Road, there's another bridge there. Well, that would probably be your local detour for those of you who want to get around. And that one's probably about 4.5 to 5 miles doing that detour. Again, detours would be limited as much as possible, depending on the style of construction, whether it's weekends or whether it's a few weeks at a time, but it's not long duration. This isn't anticipated to be a long duration detour. If we did something like this, we would be looking at rapid bridge construction. So at this time, I'd like to just open it up to the floor for any comments or questions, and this is anything that anybody has, or if Nate wants to add anything first before we open it up.
Yeah, sure. I'll just make a couple of comments. Again, this is preliminary design.
Yep.
And we haven't made any decisions about the project, and we're really here to get your feedback. Everything that Greg said is just some of the ideas that we have that are out there. And we also, you know, we wanted to show you some of the possible upgrades in rail that we could do, really to get you guys, you know, thinking about this future project. So at this time, if any has a question or a comment,
Observations. Yeah.
speak up to the mic. Just you can state your name for the court reporter before you speak. That'd be great.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Dave Witham, I'm a city councilor in Somersworth. I'm also the council's rep to the local planning board, also the council rep to the Historic District Commission in Somersworth. And just by way of some background for those that aren't familiar, the city of Somersworth council and mayor recently did send a letter to the Maine Department of Transportation, certainly encouraging and suggesting some design enhancements at this stage in the game. So I'm glad to see that those are at least being considered at this point in time. That was driven and underscored, quite frankly, by the fact that the bridge is certainly a gateway into both communities. It handles the numbers that I've been provided, somewhere around between 11 and 12,000 cars per day on average. As you've recognized, there's a fair amount of pedestrian traffic that's over that bridge on a daily basis. So it is a unique bridge in terms of its capacity for both vehicles and pedestrians. You indicated that the city of Somersworth has some projects in the works. We have been awarded a transportation enhancement grant, which is designated to address sidewalks, wayfinding signage, some beautification elements throughout much of the downtown corridor up to this point at the bridge. So certainly tying in those aspects makes sense to us, and we would certainly encourage that. Another unique feature of the bridge, other than being a gateway into the community, is the fact that it directly abuts what is the largest contiguous historic district in the state of New Hampshire, something that we're quite proud of, and we work diligently to try to maintain and improve on a daily basis. I would note for the record that the chairman of the local historic district commission is in attendance here as well this evening. So all of those factors matter from my point of view in terms of the design enhancements to address aesthetics. You offered a couple of different models up here. They all appeal to me in one way or another. I guess the thing that I would like to avoid is sort of just that standard look that you illustrated first. To the degree that we can avoid that industrial, aluminum look, I think it would be desirous given the location of this project. Within the past several years, the area has also experienced a number of flooding events, and the river has not gone untouched by those flooding events. So as you continue with your engineering work and consider whether or not the spans below the bridge need to be addressed, I would only note by way of a casual observer that the bridge spans have come in contact with the flow of the river during these flood events. And the spans have almost become a net, if you will, catching large debris, trees, and that sort of thing. Not sure if it jeopardizes the bridge, but to a lay observer seems a little concerning. So certainly to give that some consideration in terms of the depth of those elements. Lastly, I hadn't much thought about it, but you raise an interesting point with regard to traffic flow during the construction period. Currently, traffic does back up on Market Street, High Street. So to the degree that traffic interruption can be minimized, I think is certainly important. You've offered some alternatives, again, pros and cons to all of those, but I think the fact that you're cognizant of traffic flow is something we would certainly encourage you to remain cognizant of throughout the project. So those are my initial words. I know I have the support of my fellow councilors. The letter we sent was unanimous to the Maine Department of Transportation. In talking with citizens around the community, members of the Planning Board, certainly members of the Historic District Commission, I think they all share in those views as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. I'd like to address one of the features that you brought up with respect to the hydraulics of the bridge, and we have noted that, and that's one of the things that we are evaluating, and I'm very glad that you brought that up. Basically, there are some controls that, I don't want to say handcuff us to certain things, but one of those is the railroad on the other side of the bridge. That will not allow us to raise the bridge. However, if we end up replacing the steel, we've gone in through and evaluated, and we can pick up about 1.5 feet, okay, just to kind of give you an idea of ballpark, like where we would be talking. So naturally, you can't probably satisfy to 100%. I've actually seen some photographs from the 06 event, which I believe was at the Mother's Day event. So where it's actually right up on the beams, and not just barely, but pretty much half the beam. So anyways, but yes, that's one of the things that we're considering. Absolutely. So very good comment. So
we did receive your letter, so thank you for sending that to us. Somersworth is contributing half the cost towards the project. Do want to note in terms of the department's position, we typically provide a standard bridge, and then any additional features that want to be added to the project, we're welcome. We don't have a problem adding to those. However, there is a local share along with each one of those enhancements. So we'll keep costs in mind as we develop these, and we'll certainly keep the communities aware of the costs associated with the enhancements. But we have that capability of providing those, and we support your efforts in that regard.
Bob Belmore, City Manager, City of Somersworth. Just a few comments. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to underscore the design capacity for this project and including aesthetic enhancements. I understand your position, but I would underscore that it's very, very important to the city in regards to it being a gateway to both communities, to both states. One thing I would point out that I think may have been in the letter, City of Somersworth secured a congressional support for $500,000 towards this project. And that was primarily not for brick and mortar for the decking. That was for aesthetic purposes. So I think design is critical to include, and to know that up front and continuing up throughout the design process. So I want this young lady to be our best friend moving forward in this project, to incorporate some of those nice aesthetic qualities that you showed on the screen here. I think Belfast was a smaller community, or was another smaller community that was shown here.
Yeah,
And
both Woodstock and Middlebury, Vermont. You know, I mean, I was actually the design engineer for the Middlebury project, and we did a lot of, and that was a focus. That was an actual focus. Was strictly aesthetics. That's really
aesthetic
so.
in the design. I can't say
Absolutely.
that enough
Yep.
and underscore it enough.
Yep.
That was critical to the city of Somersworth. The city of Dover recently did a small bridge down in their downtown off their main street by the mills. You might look at that. It's somewhat similar. I don't know that you really need to look at it. The town of Plymouth also did one over the last few years. Again, that had that quality lighting, the black railing, some nice decking, and some pedestrian improvements. So again, design, aesthetic quality, critical. I noted the weekend work. You know, certainly would encourage you to look very closely at that. I would think that would the entire both communities and the business communities might benefit from that, but I certainly would like to hear from some of the business community. I came here thinking about night construction. I didn't hear you say that, but certainly either night construction or weekends. You might want to closely look at that and give us more feedback as you look at that through the process. In regards to public outreach, the sooner the better, the more the better. So I'd encourage you to work with both communities so that we can utilize our medium. We cable broadcasts, we do e-newsletters, we do a lot of outreach to our community. So the more information you can provide to us, the sooner, the better we're able to get it out. I'd encourage you to get something to the newspapers, get something to the businesses, and make sure that we do it, you know, sooner than later and often. In regards to a couple logistical things, will you consider this type of presentation and hearing at City Hall in Somersworth? I'd certainly welcome that, would encourage it so that we could televise it and have a similar presentation. So I won't ask you for the slide or anything like that, and we'll move forward a hearing over there. That would be fantastic. I'd appreciate that. We'll all get copies of the minutes through the email process if we signed up. Okay. Well, very good. Again, just in closing, again, it's the gateway to both communities. Design, aesthetic quality, enhancements are critical. So, thank you.
Hello, I'm Diane Bright. I live here in downtown Berwick, and I use the bridge frequently as a pedestrian and a driver. So I just want to let you know what my interests would be as I sort of represent that group of folks. I would be looking for adequate protection for pedestrians. Using the bridge would be great if there was a sidewalk on both the north and south sides. But I think perhaps more importantly would be some sort of a buffer, not just the bike lane or whatever you might call it, between the cars and the pedestrians. But you did have in one of the photographs actually a substantial concrete and aluminum railing that would protect the pedestrians, because there are all kinds of, you know, families with young kids and elderly. A lot of people use that and walk across it. And I would like to see some, you know, something done for bicycles so that people can, whether they're on the sidewalk or not, I'm not sure how it would be done, but something done so that people are encouraged to bike more in the downtown area. And you mentioned that this scope of work is limited to the bridge, but I'm wondering how you are integrating it with sort of a master plan for the downtown Berwick area, especially as the traffic flow issues that people have already mentioned.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. This is a bridge project. We are here because we have a bridge deck that's in poor condition. That is our first focus here, is to be able to improve the bridge deck. We will be coordinating our efforts with the cities of Somersworth regarding their project and have some consistency between any of the aesthetic treatments that we incorporate into the bridge, and that'll be through public outreach and then just direct coordination with your public officials, so that we have projects that make sense or that just work together. And then we'll certainly look into some different, in terms of protecting pedestrians. We'll continue to look at that. Pedestrian and bicycle usage. We don't normally have a separated barrier for a low-speed a bridge like this. We have looked at the 2 sidewalk option, and it does seem reasonable to have 2 sidewalks here. It may be a little bit of a challenge to add a separated barrier that may take away from the space you have available for pedestrians. For the bicycles. If you add in a second barrier in here, you lose a bit of that shoulder, which the bicycles would like to be on that shoulder. That's where they typically would be here on either side. So we don't normally like to steal the roadway space by adding in an additional barrier. We are already somewhat limited by the space that we have because of the tight geometric. But we'll look at it. Those are good suggestions, and we'll further evaluate it through the preliminary design process.
And if I may, just real quickly, as far as standards are concerned, the shoulders that we're providing on this, right now, I don't know exactly what the shoulder width is, but it's not very wide going from Somersworth to Maine. But AASHTO standards, minimum shoulder width for an area to consider it bike usable would be 5 feet. Just to kind of give you an idea of the geometrics here, what this configuration is a 6-foot shoulder. So it's considered usable for bicyclists by AASHTO standards. And then the sidewalk itself being 5 foot. To do a combined multi-use path, it has to be wider typically. We don't, as Nate alluded to, we're kind of restrained by the actual geometrics of the existing bridge. And so we're actually going back with something similar to the width, but trying to accommodate by squeezing the traffic towards the center of the bridge, providing wider shoulders on either side and a sidewalk on either side. So anyways, we're all part of the AASHTO design process and considerations, particularly in urban environments. So.
Peter Perry, I'm a resident of Berwick, also on the planning board. I'm curious, have you given any consideration of building the bridge without sidewalks and possibly putting a sidewalk structure downstream 25, 30 feet? And I mention that kind of also because the town of Dover has a nice little covered bridge for sale, I think. But it's not, that's not just the point that I bring up. They built that bridge in Dover at the end of Washington Street, and it's a nice looking structure that they did. And they put sidewalks on the new structure they built, and they removed the covered bridge. To me, it would have been more effective to have left that nice little covered bridge that was only about 20 years old and not have had sidewalks at all on the bridge. Or have you given any thought to doing something
Well, those are
totally alternative?
Sure, those are some really good creative ideas. We do have to keep cost. Can I borrow that?
Sure.
Yeah, we do need to keep cost into consideration here. I guess in theory you could possibly have a pedestrian bridge elsewhere that does require additional right-of-way that we need to acquire. There's a rail crossing that would be associated with something like that. I see a number of challenges that may have to be overcome. We do think, based on what my preliminary findings that I think is maybe a better solution here is to improve the sidewalk on the other side. There's one that has I consider a safety walk. It's about a 2.5 foot sidewalk. If we make that more of a legal sidewalk, which is at least 5 feet, and we could have safe pedestrian access on both sides. I think this is a really good, balance of meeting all the users of pedestrians and the bicycles and the motor vehicles too. But we won't, we'll certainly, if there's something else that we're not thinking of, if there's any other ideas, we'll give it some consideration.
I'm Bob Crichton, selectman from town here. Has there any consideration been given to the entrance and exit of the sidewalks? Because at the present time, the one on the main side ends up facing the railing of the bridge. Not very effective method of getting there. By the same token, on the Somersworth side, it appears that about the same thing happens. It would appear to me that the curbing and sidewalk on the roadways themselves leading up to the bridge would have to be altered. Have you considered that at all? Or is that going to be responsibility of the communities?
Well, based on my observation on the, I'll call it the northeast corner, I believe there's a parking lot there now, if memory serves. So, again, whether or not there would be something incorporated on that particular quadrant or whether it's sufficient now, again, it's somewhat incidental, I guess I would say, as far as, how to make that connection, but that could potentially be added. I don't know. On the northwest side, the thing that provides the biggest discontinuity there is the railroad tracks. So there is going to be a gap right there. And I believe in the park, and again, I would have to go back and look at some photographs and take a walk down there, whether or not there's an actual sidewalk existing there now. I believe there is around the bend. I don't know where it terminates currently, but again, before the tracks. Okay, just before the tracks. So, and again, that would be something that we would coordinate with, the city of Somersworth on that side for their enhancement project, and I believe that their project terminates at the bridge. So we would definitely work to close that gap and make it as, as continuous, for lack of a better word, or consistent as possible.
The issue that I see is, especially coming down Rochester Street and going onto the bridge, with the sidewalk built at 5 feet, the total granite curbing that leads to line up with the granite on the bridge, or whatever the curb might be, is going to shorten the radius up on that turn. And doing that, I'm wondering if the island hasn't got to be narrowed up that divides it right there. It's right now it's fairly narrow, and it might not have to be, but I think it's something that should be looked at.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Louisa Sheldon. I live on Sullivan Street, which would be parallel to School Street. And I'm just going to ask you regarding the newspaper advertisement about the hearing. I just want you to define the sentence that whoever was invited regarding this bridge rehab, regarding the fact that you want to address the rehabilitation of the bridge and whether it would fit in with local master plans and the continued discovery of local resources. All I really want you to define is local master plans, what you mean by that, and who, in our town would be responsible or, in coordination with you guys with that, and, what you mean by continued discovery of local resources. That's all I want to know.
Sure, I think that's just working through the city of Somersworth, local government, and the town of Berwick. And we have had discussions with both of the local governments and discovering what their needs are. And we're certainly well aware of the city of Somersworth, their desire for some aesthetic improvements that will go together with their downtown project.
Okay,
And if there are other things that we're not aware of, we certainly welcome them to share them with us.
okay. So would we contact our town officials regarding any master plans that they have going on that would need to be coincided with this?
Yes, that would be appropriate.
Okay. Would that be ongoing with DOT, Maine?
Maine DOT, our project here is the bridge replacement project.
Okay.
And any other project would be done through your local government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
John Jackman, a resident over in Somersworth, and I got your letter for the meeting here, but I have a couple things. One, the aesthetics is very important to me, and I'd also not only like to see the enhancement of the sidewalks, but I think lighting on the bridge would also add a lot, and I believe with the LED lighting and everything else that you can have a very attractive, low-cost energy usage.
Good point. In fact, I just want to point out this bridge here in Middlebury, which is one that we recently did. These lights are, in fact, LED.
Okay.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we worked with the town of Middlebury. I believe they actually obtained a grant to partially fund those LEDs for doing those types of improvements. Now, I don't know, how often those programs are available or whatnot, but certainly in this case, we did that. And so, yes, and there's lots of flexibility in these lighting standards as far as what the poles look like and so on and so forth. So again, that we would work with the city of Somersworth, town of Berwick, for, if they're going to be using other lights off the bridge, would want to obviously incorporate the same standard on the bridge if possible.
Very good. The other thing I'd like to bring up that the councilor brought up was the flooding and the hydraulic flows.
Yep.
If we had looked at a flooding event that had occurred with ice on the river, the impact of having ice dams coming down, hitting the top, the hydraulics of that would have been a much more dramatic impact on that bridge and possibly could have moved it, which would have caused basically the closing of the bridge. I would hate to see this type of investment made and have that type of risk still pending. So that would be, another opinion. The last thing I just want to mention is I know this bridge is 50 years old, and it concerns me that bridges only last 50 years, and we make these large investments. And this is a bridge that, as most, are deteriorated by salt and sand and the winters and everything, and the way it's designed. It's also a location where it's a queue for a traffic light. So you end up tending to use more salt and sand because cars have to stop and everything else. This sand also then ends up just going directly right into the river. There's no catch basin or anything. It washes off, and it's a direct impact to the river. Just for something that might be out of the box, and I always like throwing something out of the box, but the possibility of having a geothermal deck on there and having integrated where you really don't have to have it in exchange, just the water being going through, and because I think the groundwater flow there, you wouldn't have to, the return would actually be kept at a temperature that would keep the deck and everything above freezing, and that would allow you not to use salt and sand, and it would also provide a safer and more less environmental impact on the project. Okay, so.
Good comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to speak to just a couple of those comments. You had some great ideas here. In terms of the bridge life, I totally agree with you. This is 50 years is a very short bridge life. Typical bridge life is 75 years. Our normal treatment here for a project is about year 50, we look to replace the bridge deck, and then we have another, sometimes we can stretch the bridge life to 100 years, but there's at least another 25 years left in the superstructure. And actually, in the case here, the steel beams are in decent condition. I think we rated them as in fair condition. We could paint the beams and have them last that additional, at least another additional 25 years. But you nailed it right on the head here with the hydraulics. The reason why we are looking at replacing the beams is strictly from a hydraulic standpoint. So in this case, the people that designed the bridge might have been short-sighted in terms of the amount of freeboard, or maybe flooding's gotten worse. But our only real reason to look at the beam replacement again is for flooding, and you really nailed it with your comments. So thank you, and
Can you go twice?
Sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, why not?
It is a surprise.
A couple speakers ago, the lady indicated some conversation around the master plan. And I would only, again, underscore, if we haven't enough already, about the aesthetics, that the city of Somersworth did recently, within the last 4 or 5 years, did a comprehensive look and redo of our master plan. And part of that master plan involved a number of, I'll call them design charrettes, looking at the downtown corridor, downtown areas, downtown facilities. And interestingly enough, part of that was to identify gateways, to enhance gateways, and to, if you will, stamp an image on the community. This hits that square on the head in terms of kind of complying, if you will, with that portion of our master plan. So not only does it just make good sense for us, it's also part of our master plan. So I thank the lady for bringing that up, because it's an important point. Thank you.
Can we go back to some of the pictures of the bridge rail?
You drive? You can the other way.
Other way, other way?
Yeah.
I am curious, maybe we can do this by show of hands, about preference for a concrete barrier versus a steel barrier, steel railing versus a concrete.
Aluminum, right?
The black is aluminum.
The one shown is aluminum. You can, they also have a steel railing too that you can get to be colored. People that might be interested in like the concrete look. I don't know if anybody, if you like the concrete look.
All concrete, all steel, or both? Both.
The hybrid with
Yeah. So let's try this again. Well, let's just go straight concrete. Okay, so there's a
Show
few.
the straight concrete, maybe.
Yeah, let's.
Go back one. There you
Yeah,
go.
this is called the Texas rail.
This is a non-binding referendum.
This is a non-binding. We are curious to see if there's any. We have shown you. We've showed you a few pictures. So there are a few of you. How about this railing?
Could
you just quick out, throw a couple of longevity maintenance type numbers for each one of these line items?
Yeah.
Because it's concrete, I know it's very durable, very tough, cars hit it, it's not gonna take a lot of damage, but road salt's going to impact it probably more than aluminum.
Yeah, I will. If you,
hybrid one you showed
sure. Let's finish the poll, and I'll come back to that comment. Here's one of the hybrids. The people that like that. Yeah, that seems to be very, very popular. And here's another hybrid railing. I think yeah. Okay. And I wanted to get the poll if there was a. This is the aluminum railing. I don't know if there are any other people that like this. So, well, we seem.
That's aluminum.
We had the two hybrid ones that seem to be attracting some favorable reviews. In terms of longevity, I will just try to answer your question. One of the problems with especially that black aluminum railing that was shown, this one which is similar to this, these often get scraped by the snowplows, and they really look good like the first year, and then each year after that, more and more of that coating gets scraped off, and then you get all these different patches of whatever the base metal color is below it. So I try to steer people away from that. We don't build a lot of these, so I don't really know the maintenance track record on this, but
I would imagine there'd be an issue with water. When you have a heavy rainstorm or snowstorm, where does the water melt and run off to? I see one catch basin actually.
Well, the way that you do the deck drainage is basically dictated by the geometry of the bridge. Julie does a lot of that, actually. She does, but the length of the bridge, the width of the bridge, and the grade of the bridge will dictate if you have to have a scupper or a drainage basin like on the bridge. A lot of times, like in the case of the Middlebury Bridge that we recently did, that has the aluminum railing on it, next one. This one, we didn't actually have anything on the bridge for a drainage standpoint. It's all immediately off the bridge. Then we had catch basins and piping and everything. We took it off then. So it just depends. But this bridge isn't as wide as your bridge. So, you know, that's the dynamic, and also the width of the shoulders. There's calculations that you go through to determine whether or not you need it on the bridge. And certainly whenever we can get it off the bridge, we like to.
on all the railings shown, that sidewalk, all that water slopes
It's all
towards
pitched
towards the road. We don't let the water drain off the fascia.
Right.
So it doesn't, regardless of which rail you pick,
Yep.
drainage is really an independent issue
Actually, if you
that
go
we'll
to-
address.
Go to the typical section and you can show that. So basically all the water is going towards the gutter, right there. So it's pitched away from the railing towards the gutter, and also the road is crowned towards the gutter. So you'll convey the water against the face of the curb, hopefully off the bridge. Sometimes you have to have a scupper on the bridge. The bridge now has scuppers, but hydraulically I don't know if it will have to.
But we can, we do plan to obviously to come back to you, and we're certainly, our next public meeting would be appropriate certainly to be in the city of Somersworth as you requested. But we can come back with some costs on the rail, and we can find out a little more information on maybe some of the maintenance associated with that rail. So.
That brings up a good point. I heard something about joints. Bridge joints. So that's another thing that we're considering too, and it's not really an aesthetic thing, it's more of a design consideration, is when we replace the deck, the trend is for natural reasons to go away from joints on bridges, because those are the Achilles heel of a bridge. So that's one of the things that we're looking at, is configuring it as what they call a deck over back wall, or actually making it effectively what they call a jointless bridge, but it's allowing the expansion and contraction to happen off the bridge, so you don't have to have a joint where the water can go, like down onto the bridge. And the length of this bridge will allow that. So when you get into the really, really long spans, that's when you have a hard time doing that, and you have to get into other types of joints. But we think that we can configure it that way here. But that's, again, part of the process as we define what the project is. That's one of the features that we definitely want to try and do.
I'm Bill Sweeney, City of Somersworth, Chairman of the Planning Board for Somersworth. In another slide, in a prior slide to that one, I saw what would be called possibly right there on the left-hand slide would be a bump out.
Yes.
And I would think something along those lines would be a good safety feature to add. Someone coming across, walking their bike, and someone coming the opposite way, people get out of the way of each other without having to have any kind of a traffic jam, if you will, on the sidewalk. So something along those lines I think would be a good idea, perhaps at the midspan of the bridge.
Okay, again, that's something we can consider. There's certainly a cost associated with that, and we can try to provide some numbers for the additional features that you guys desire. So.
Yeah, Peter Perry again, Berwick Planning Board. I just have a quick question about the lighting. They're attractive lighting, and I can understand why people would want more lighting on the bridge. But also, are they like the lights you're intending to be like night sky compliant stuff, where basically the light is all downward, not outward?
Yep. There's shrouds that they put on the lights depending on what the requirements are of the locale. If it's, middle of a downtown area, sometimes they want as broad of a broadcast of the light as possible. Sometimes depending on the lighting situations. We've actually had where there's sensitive areas for like fish and so forth, so they don't want a lot of light cast down into the water, so we'll put a shroud on it to kind of restrict that. The answer is yes.
That all comes into the design.
Yeah, and it's based on, it's context-sensitive design. If they need to, they can focus the light one way or another. But, and there's also, I mean, the technology now for the LEDs has really come a long way. And the design life for those is quite good. And the color, the warmth is quite good. This is actually, they're really happy, the town is, with the LED.
Okay. One just last question is, she piqued my interest about the master plan in the town of Berwick. I think de facto the planning board is the one that kind of oversees and is responsible for master plan and planning. I'm just curious as who you've been talking to in town, because I don't think you've come to talk to anybody on the planning board at this point in time. And we kind of deal with that more than most anybody in town.
Yep.
Yeah, if you guys have, I would certainly, and we'd welcome to hear any of the comments we have from your local government, Bart, how this project would work with any of the comprehensive plans that you guys have in town. And we'll reach out more to them to get their comments or whatnot, so.
And also, just to point out, again, this is at the very beginning stages, so you know, really, we're taking this input, and then we're also going to be doing other outreach to refine that as well. So, yes.
Brian Sincata, a resident and president of the Historical Society. Wouldn't it be proper to have signs in the middle welcoming people into New Hampshire and welcoming people into Maine? And whose responsibility would that be?
That's a good question, and I think there is a sign there now.
I guess
signs, and I know one of them looked.
I guess I'm saying who would pay for it.
I think what you see up there is your typical, kind of DOT sign. We certainly would be willing to work with you folks on any type of sign that you'd like to put up there, as long as it meets certain standards. If there is a standard, so we'll have to investigate that further.
I would think you'd want to have a sign.
Yes, yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Good comment.
Yes.
Second question. Mr. Perry posed a good point, that if DOT is doing this on their own, they haven't consulted with Berwick or the planning board. We thought that, I thought that the town, Somersworth, would coordinate with DOT, practically begging you guys to revitalize this this bridge. So would you please explain to me that you're kind of here on your own? There really isn't anybody representing Berwick except a couple of selectmen here. I don't believe our manager is present. There's a couple planning board people.
Yeah, we did. We had a railroad meeting,
that is.
A utility meeting earlier today at 2:30, and we did speak with your town manager, and he was present for that.
Okay.
And we have spoken with your city engineer on a couple of different occasions. So we have had contact with the town of Berwick.
Okay.
I have not met with the selectmen, and I would certainly welcome any of the selectmen, if you have direct comments towards this project, to share those with us. And then if there's any needs that you guys have that we haven't heard yet, we'd certainly be interested in your feedback and your comments.
I'm actually kind of interested in the funding. Does it come out of state resources? I thought that the town and city of Somersworth had to kind of co-sponsor this to get funding. Is that how it works?
Well, I'll explain the funding. Maine Department of Transportation and the city of Somersworth are the co-owners of the bridge. If we build a standard design, and we're obviously plan on having aesthetic treatments here, but let's just talk about if we had just a base bridge here, if this bridge was somewhere else, then the Maine Department of Transportation would pay 50% of that, and the city of Somersworth would pay the other 50%. Once we start adding any type of local or any additional treatments, aesthetic treatments, or if they're bump outs or anything like that, any additional features that go on beyond what the base bridge is, then we typically have a 50-50 share of what those additional enhancements would be. We are still working through the details of an agreement through with the Department of Transportation, the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, the cities of Somersworth, and also our federal partners, which is the Federal Highway Administration, which oversees all the federal dollars on the project. So that will, an agreement is in the works right now, and we hope to have that in as quickly as we can, and then we can share with that more as maybe in our next meeting.
Okay. But if our community people wanted to encourage upgrades that, you guys are covering a basic revitalization here. If they demand more things, that they start bringing in more aesthetics, historical issues, that funding is going to be the burden of those communities. Am I correct?
There's a possibility that the town of there's a possibility that the town of Berwick would be responsible for a piece of some of the aesthetic upgrades. But we'll work through the details as we develop this agreement and also develop an estimate for what those are. Some of the details that we've been looking at have not been necessarily huge ticket items. But why don't we work on developing some costs? We've already identified one railing that people like, and we'll also have some numbers on adding the light posts, which has been a feature that has been desirable, at least we've heard from the public at this meeting. And we've also heard about the bump out, and we'll develop an estimate for that as well. And if there's any other features that are really desirable, let us know, and we'll look into it.
Okay, when you guys do renovate something like this, and depending on the type of upgrade, is that going to change its classification maybe? Like make it more historical, something like that? When we talk about preservation, historical, aesthetics, we're getting into other categories that citizens around here, no burden to the DOT, but can change things for us. So I'm just, if I don't really say that well, but that would possibly change a classification if there were more demands put on this project?
I don't believe this bridge has been classified as a historic bridge, so it doesn't fit that criteria right now. But we can certainly, railing that we select here can fit in with the communities, or we can have a railing that would be approved by all the residents in the local governments, and making sure that it's compatible, I guess, with any of the historic resources in the community.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Okay. So we, like I said, we have some work to do, and we'll look to conclude our preliminary engineering likely in June. I think that would be an appropriate time to come back and have our next public meeting. There can be some outreach, and I've given my email address and contact information is on the notice. You're welcome to email me, or also work through your local government as well. So thank you all for attending, and we'll come back here in a few months.
Thank you.